Welcome to Carolina Sculpture Studio. My name's Clint Button. I'm a granite sculptor. Welcome to video number 172 of the Virtual Stone Carving Apprenticeship. Well, it cooled down, but it cooled down because it's been raining non-stop. So when you work in a little studio, you kind of expect to have a little bit in front of the studio to work with like we cast before. You know, it's nice, but when it's raining like crazy, you gotta work inside. So I've been doing some housekeeping. I guarantee, you know, whenever I see somebody's got a studio and they got tons of open space, they got there's just miles of room all around and nothing going on. You kind of wonder, you know. A lot of the guys I know that work, they got a pretty small shop. They don't have a lot of spare empty space. So, but anyways, this is all down here now, and I love my little platform lift, stacker, whatever you call it, and you can get them with forks, you can get them with just the platform, and they're really nice, and works well if you drive it with just a foot, so that you're not pushing things over, but it's and this would probably be a little bit tall to be ideal for doing this, but you know, everything's a compromise, and the weight shouldn't be a problem. We've had plenty of weight on this before. It's good and solid. So I got to go back up in the air conditioning and get the nuts and bolts and stuff. I haven't stuck them through yet. But got everything put together pretty well. Really happy with it. A lot of times you come after you've done all this work, you'll start looking at it and you'll see little bits of fabric or little bits of foam that are exposed, and if you do, fix it. You know, it isn't going to magically heal. It isn't going to be, oh, it's not going to make it. No, it'll be a pain in the butt when the plastic gets into all that weave in the fabric or into the foam on the cells on the foam, it'll stick. So go ahead and get that all done. I could go along now and try to train these edges and get them really, really perfect. I'm not gonna. It's just, it's fiddling stuff and you don't need to do it. If it sticks out here a little bit on the foam or the plaster, I don't care, okay? I'm worried about this. I don't care if this is buggered around this flange. That doesn't mean anything to me, okay? So, and you know, for people that are wondering, yeah, we probably could have got away with not putting the fabric on this front, you know, but by doing it, I can do it thinner so it unmolds easier, so it doesn't break fragile detail, and it's a lot cheaper to, you know, go get a piece of, you know, an old rec shirt or something like that. You know, it doesn't have to be the yoga pant kind of stretchy spandex stuff, but that's what I like the best, you know. But that takes the shore strength of this mold just off the charts compared to what it'll be with silicone. You'd have to have silicone an inch thick to be that strong, and it'd be so stiff, it wouldn't be worth doing it. And that's another reason why I'm not as crazy about some of the expensive products that that are too soft. What happens, you can buy, like I've got silica, I've got fumed silica on the shelf to mix with my pourable 2-part expensive silicone to make it thixotropic, to make it stiff, okay, to make it more like putty. And the more silica you put in, the stiffer it gets. And so then you can put it on and it'll hold its shape. And yeah, it works, but it's one more thing I got to deal with. And it's a whole lot easier to cut a tube of silicone and get an old t-shirt and just make it. So do what works for you, all right? I'm gonna finish getting things out. I've got my sink hooked up, which I love that sink. That sink's one of the best things I ever built. I just love it. And I got to get the rest of my stuff staged. I'm going to put up a little table. I want to put a tarp, something over the stone, just so I don't have to clean the stone, because it's a lot easier to shake the tarp off than it is to have to get a little splats of plaster out of the rock pitch on that and have it look good. So I'm going to do that, and we'll be back here and see where it goes. Something that I do like, that I use, well, when I use it. I keep it around. I like it a lot. I've got these old workmate foldable tables, and if you, instead of using two of them, you can take and screw this to the plywood and then clamp this in the top. It gives you a lot better table without having to have two of these set up, because two of them's a lot. And I don't need a huge table, but have some plaster and a couple of buckets and some stuff to stage with. It works really, really well. So I'll do some video magic and I'll show you. Now I got it tacked in there. Just slide it in. Loosen that just a tad. It's a really good table. I'll put a couple more screws in. You can't go climbing on it. You still have to pay attention. You kind of want to have it centered, of course. But it's real easy to do. It's worth watching for a piece of, because see, that's a nice sturdy. If we go way out on the end, it'll get crazy. But we don't need to do that. We'll keep it balanced and keep enough weight on it so that it's pretty well centered, and that's good enough. We're just going to get plaster all over it. All right. Instead of painting the hole, got all my bolts in, you know, my all thread pieces of it, gonna hold it together. I probably got more than I need, but it's what it is, okay? I think it ended up being 40, which is, you know, it isn't, I'm not gonna run, I'm not worried about it being loose. It's gonna hold together pretty well. But, instead of painting the whole lengths of them with Vaseline to keep the plaster out, I went ahead and took some blue masking tape, painter's tape, and put a spin around each end of them. And that left, you know, they're 3 inches long, so 1 inch or 1 inch, I left an inch in the middle with open threads. And so I put some Vaseline on them. The Vaseline can also help. A couple of these a couple of them are pretty loose. This one here. And so I tried to put some extra Vaseline in there to dam up the hole. See, it doesn't take long for it to sag, so that the plaster doesn't go through and marry from one side to the other. It should be plenty thick enough it'll break apart, but that just kind of helps it. I like the Vaseline, and you get done, you can squeeze your brush out and just fold it up in a piece of copy paper, just regular clean paper. Keep your brush nice and square and shaped and everything like you're supposed to anyways. You can always clean this out. You know, you can usually clean the Vaseline out with some good degreaser. You know, if you've got you know, hand cleaner, if you do Vaseline or like gasoline or anything, you know, whatever you use to clean your oil paint brushes. But it'll keep your brush really nice. So that's all done. I've got my bag of chalk, you know, my filament here, that's burlap that's been cut to length and then pulled apart, teased out. You can use all kinds of stuff for filament. This is nice because while you're handling it, it doesn't mat up as well. If you use synthetic, I mean, I've got, you know, big spools of thread and stuff like that, and it works, but it lays down really flat. This tends to be, where you can see just in my hand, it's easy to have it have some volume, okay? And so that helps when you're mixing it up, so it's not just a flat mat that's saturated. You can get it spread out. So we use that. And again, this is, and I don't remember how much of this I've gone over in detail before or not. These are like coffee bags, burlap bags. Cut them up into strips, you know, into widths a certain length. You can just pull them apart, you know, it's pretty exciting stuff. You just sit there and tease it apart. But you know, this is what you do in downtime between jobs. Okay, this is how you fill your time, because if you go buy fancy stuff, you got to work enough to make enough money to buy what you're going to use. And so it has to fit your scene, the way you do it, and fit your budget, because everything costs money. And if you've got open time, that's the same thing with building chisels. When I've got time, I build chisels. I pull apart, chop, or work on the tools and equipment, maintenance and everything. You know, or else you got to pay somebody else to do it. So I've got all my plaster gear out. I've got my cheat sheet, you know, with all of my recipes. The important one is, after doing all this stuff, now I've got it written up over here on the side. It says 2 gallons hydrocal, 1 gallon water. Okay, and I've got my things for like hydrostone, whatever. And I hang this up in the shop, hangs on the wall, or stays in the barrel or whatever. Basically what I do now that I've done it enough, and you're going to have to learn how much plaster to mix, okay, and how much you're going to need, and the rate that you're going to apply it. Because if you have to overlay plaster, you know, if you make a gallon or 2 gallons of plaster, you pour it in a mold, and that's all you need, that's all you need. But with something like this, we're going to make a batch of plaster and then see how far it goes. And I'm sure that 1 gallon won't cover this whole thing. I don't know how many gallons it will take to cover all of this and down here. So you got to get into a system. This is my 1 gallon dry measure, okay? And I scoop this full with, I like this metal cup just because it works really well. You can make one, just rivet a handle to an old tin can, and it works really well. If you leave the plaster on anything, it will rust it, and it'll eat through your can. So, but doesn't have to be fancy. Measure it up without compacting it. Once I have a gallon, I'll put it in my dry tubs, okay? 1 gallon, 2 gallons. My favorite Little Giant, I think it's an 8. It's a 2 gallon. I forget if they're like how they're listed. If they're listed at 8 quarts or what they are, but it's a 2 gallon bucket. They're rubber. They're for horses and livestock, so they won't bend them and ruin them. I love these buckets. These buckets are so great. You got the flat back, everything. So, and they're measured inside, so you can run a gallon of water, 4 quarts of water, have it sitting there. 2 gallons of plaster, run it in slow. 1 hand dry, 1 hand wet. Run it in slow and mix it, and you've got 2 gallons of plaster, or hydrocal, or whatever you use. And then you can apply it. Depending on how you're running it, you may need more than 1 bucket. Or you may be, now, just listen to what I'm saying, okay? I'm not trying to put you down. You may not be ready to run 2 gallons of plaster at once, depending on how complicated the task is. You may be better off to run 1 gallon and stagger it, and have the other gallon come in a little bit later. Because if this is still pretty wet and green, that's one thing that's really great about the hydrocal, is it marries really, really well. You can pour more on top of it. Plaster of Paris isn't strong in the first place, And so if you lay more plaster on it once it started to cure, I don't think it marries or it gathers, it holds together as well. Okay, you can have a separation where those two layers meet, the old and the new. Okay, the hydrocal seems to be way better than that. But you'll have to learn. You have all your prep, all your mise en place, everything ready, measured out, ready to go, whether it's 1 gallon or 2 gallons or 2 quarts or 4 quarts of water, whatever. I'm reasonably good at this, and 2 gallons of plaster is about my limit to be able to stay in a nice even rhythm. Okay, and so you mix your plaster up, you start working, and about the time that it starts to go off, when you're about halfway through that batch, when it starts to really thicken up, it's creaming and starting to thicken up, you got to learn how quickly you can start your next batch by marrying the plaster into the water, the dry into the wet, and then stir it so it can start to go over. And then you can go from this plaster being ready, pull this off, empty your bucket, clean this bucket, clean it. And I mean clean it, like really clean it. Soap and water with a brush and everything. That's all sitting behind me with the sink and the buckets and everything. Have all that ready to go. And then you can have your next bucket ready to go. And in between that, you gotta have time to clean this bucket, measure out more plaster if you need to, put it in the dry, put more water in your clean bucket, and then take your bucket of the next batch and start running it. And you'll find that there's a certain limit to where you can do it and do it really well. This shouldn't be as complicated because this is nowhere near as big, as much plaster as that full length model that we did for the Angel. So, but I'm gonna get started on it, and we'll see how much video I can get, because once my hands get plaster all over them, even though it's dry, it's hard. The dry interferes with touching the screen. I do want to mention, it's good when you're doing this to have some kind of real hand lotion on. The gypsum products, the plaster products, are very, I don't know, they're not nice to your hands. They'll really dry them out. You'll end up with little bits of plaster all up and down your arms. If you're a guy and you got hair on your arms, you'll end up having all these things you got to pull off. If you're a girl, you shave your arms or whatever, you may not have that. I don't know. If you take some of this Vaseline or some really good hand lotion, there's a product called Gloves in a Bottle, and it's more like a barrier than a regular hand lotion. It's kind of like putting Elmer's glue on your hand without the thick skin. But it's my favorite product. Hard to find. You got to order it off of Amazon. Gloves in a Bottle, and it's white, blue, and white container. But put something on your hands to try to keep them moisturized during this, because depending on what you're doing between the plaster and the dish detergent that I use to clean with and everything, it really wreck your hands and make them sore. And then they split, and then they don't heal because they're cracked and it's a drag. So, I think we're just about ready to start. I've got my plaster and tools. I got to tarp this up. We're ready to go. So, all right, I'll see what kind of video we can get of this. Okay, before I get started, my table, let me show you one more time my favorite awesome utility sink. I got just and you get a plastic one. This one came up on the computer for, I don't know, maybe $100, $50. It was really cheap. I didn't think it was $100. So I bought it, took the 4 metal legs off and made a little cabinet for it out of pressure treated. Then I put a manifold on here so I can have my water to my faucet. And you got to have both of them hooked up for that one-handed faucet to work. And then this other manifold goes over here for a short garden hose with a sprayer. I just run it out, put a bucket under there because it's easier than creating a mud puddle right there. Then I can dump it off to the side. Because it's warm, the water coming down in the hose tends to be warm. Okay, so we got to pour it out I got my great big giant crazy ladle here that I love it for mixing out, for running out water, because it holds 72 ounces at once. It holds a great big bunch. So I run my water out ahead of time so it can cool off. If you're doing this and it's really hot, you may have to put ice cubes in it. Okay, then I got a bucket of soapy water and my brush right here. And you know, I don't keep it sucking in the water because it'll wreck it. If it's plastic, it's okay, but this is wood, so I don't. And I've got my bucket barrel with an old barrel with my plastic ready to go. My wrapped up old bag. We'll get that going. But I wanted to show you my prep. Put a tarp over everything so it won't get any plaster spray on it. But this is a really good format for a utility sink. And it lives right inside the studio. I don't leave it out. But it's really stable. You know, even on crooked ground, it's a whole lot better than squatting down, sitting on a bucket, scrubbing everything on the ground, like I did for a long time. I just finally decided it was time to have a good utility sink. And even if you've got a nice sink inside, when you do anything with plaster, you should use it as a dry sink and not run it down your pipes, because that plaster, just like clay, can cause real problems. All right, start running some plaster. This plaster all feels really good. It's been open for quite a while, but I always double bag it. Put it inside 2 heavy bags, put it in 1 plastic bag, construction, you know, trash bag, and then twist it tight, and then put it in another plastic bag, a big heavy, and twist it tight, keep it in that barrel. And this still feels nice and smooth. It's cool to the touch. There's no grit in it, so it should be fine. I'm going to stage 2 buckets and then see how much to go from there. I think I'll need more than 2, but I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. This is getting to the point of saturation, so and I don't like to if you just mix it you know, by feel, you know, pour a bucket out, you're gonna have to learn how much you can make. And you can still handle it and run it. I did get out a couple of plastic scrapers to help put this on. I don't like the metal ones for plaster as much because it rusts them. And the metal ones I've got, I like them a lot. You'll find the metal putty knives that you use for your plaster and your utility stuff. It's just like buying spatulas to do. You know, if you're painting and you paint with spatulas, we use our spatulas. They get very, you'll understand how sensitive they are and what feels right. What you like, and once I start getting that, I don't like to wreck them potentially by making them rusty. And having to fight to get all the plaster off of them. Now you can just leave your plaster, your burlap or whatever together and put it on. The problem is that it can make it weak. I did that for years and I didn't like it as much. That's how I was shown how to do it. We could get the same burlap bags. Also try to keep the rag, this will drop my rag in case you need it. But I don't like just the burlap fabric. I like the chop a lot better. And I think having the filaments separated to where they're an irregular mat, you get way better strength and way better coverage. This is starting to cream up because it's warm out. It's a lot faster. Now I did separate out some of my burlap, some of my chop here in the box. I don't want to be working out of my bag, my inventory directly, because if this gets in there, it makes a mess. And this is going to go a lot faster because I can't necessarily put this on. It's not going to stay that well until it's pretty thick. And you can release this if you want. I don't, because that's just not what I do. I'd rather have the mother stuck to the rubber and pull the rubber off. That's really clean up. All right, I'm probably gonna get this close, and I'm gonna have to turn the camera off because once I get going, I'm not gonna be able to stop and deal with it. So we'll see how this goes. See, it's still a little bit wet. It's still running. All right, doing video, editing stuff, and this is a good place to break it because I'm getting into, really kind of flying with it. So we're gonna break it off here in this video. We'll pick right up the next video in just a second and see if I can get this washed out of the plaster. But my name's Clint Button. I'm a grant sculptor here at Carolina Sculptor Studio with the Virtual Stone Carving Apprenticeship and a Hornet. Thanks for coming in.